Shalom and welcome. My name is Neil Cooper. I'm the Rabbi Emeritus at Temple Beth Hillel-Beth in Wynwood, Pennsylvania. And it is here in this synagogue that our community mikveh is housed. I want to tell you a little bit about the mikveh. I want to share with you some stories and some insights about this amazing place that we have. And I want to tell you why it's so amazing. First of all, many people have never really heard about a mikveh. When I was studying in rabbinical school, there was very little mention of the use of mikveh. It was used by some very religious people, very observant people, but generally, no one else used it. And it's curious. It's strange to think about the fact that we have this mitzvah and it's no longer being observed by many people. Why is that? I began to think about that. And I think it has to do with some misunderstandings about the mikveh. You see, there was a thought at one point that the mikveh had to do with cleanliness. It doesn't. In fact, when a person goes to the mikveh, they have to be clean before they go into a mikveh. But beyond that misunderstanding that people would say, I don't need to go to mikveh to be clean. We need to go to a mikveh in order to be pure. And that purity is an essential and yet very difficult concept to grasp. Let me take you back to the origins of mikveh in order to understand what's going on. If I were to go back far enough, I think we'll find together the origin of this notion of mikveh all the way back to the story of creation. You'll know the story of creation. In 7 days, God creates, 6 days, God creates the heavens, 7th day is Shabbat. And during the beginning of the creation story, we have a series of separations of elements, primordial elements, if you will, being separated as part of the process of creation. And so when God wants to separate land from water, presumably this primordial mix was something like mud, that this planet was just a big ball of mud, but God wanted to make things separate. And so God made high places, which by definition created low places. The high places became mountains and hills, the low places, rivers, streams, lakes, oceans. And the Torah says this, that God made the high places and the water ran down the sides of the hills and the mountains, and the waters were gathered at the bottom in the forms of lakes and oceans. The waters were gathered. That word in Hebrew, vayikavu, the waters were gathered. That's the root word for mikveh. Mikveh is, technically speaking, a gathering of water. A gathering of water that takes place in exactly the same way that it's described in the book of Genesis at the beginning of the story of creation. That is, water running naturally down, collecting below, and staying there. That's a collection of water. That's exactly what the mikveh is. That's important to us, because what it means when you go into the mikveh, first and foremost, is you are going back to the start. You're going back to the beginning. Mikveh is about returning to the start. And when we return, that moment becomes a moment of rebirth for us. Rebirth, continuing, beginning again. That's the first idea to keep in mind. There's another idea I want to share with you, and that is the seminal Jewish story of the Torah, which is the crossing of the Red Sea. You'll imagine that image, which is described beautifully in the book of Exodus. When the children of Israel are standing at the sea at the edge, the Egyptian armies are coming behind them, and Moses extends his rod, the waters split. And the children of Israel follow through on dry land. The children of Israel go through, they come to the other side, and the waters return. Think about that image. The idea of coming through the water, the idea of coming into the water, in that case, as slaves, escaping Egypt, and coming out as a free people. There's that transition, a major moment in history, in our history, is that transition from slavery to freedom. And it happens coming through the water, like a baby being born and becoming a new entity entering the world. That's the image of the Red Sea, and that's what the image of the mikveh is. Coming through the water, entering the water as one thing, and coming out as something new, something different. These two images, the image of creation, the image of the Exodus and the crossing of the sea, I want you to keep those in mind when you think about a mikveh. These are the ideas, I think, that teach us something that I never knew about until we built our mikveh here 20 years ago. What they teach me is that not that the mikveh is irrelevant, not that the mikveh is something that should be relegated to only a small percentage of the Jewish people. The mikveh is not some archaic tradition. But it's been abrogated because it's too powerful. And things that are powerful scare us. This notion of going back to creation requires a complete transformation that's scary because it's powerful. This idea of starting as one thing and coming out as something else, that's powerful. And that's what the mikveh is about. In ancient times, in Jerusalem, where the temple was built, these two temples were built, people would go to the mikveh all the time. In order to come close to God in ancient times, when there was a temple, a person would bring a sacrifice to the temple. They didn't have rabbis and synagogues, cantors, prayer books. They simply brought a sacrifice. And to bring a sacrifice to the temple required not only that you bring that you are sacrificing, but the person bringing it needed to be pure before coming, and therefore they had to go to the mikveh. The mikveh was the spiritual preparation originally for bringing a sacrifice to God. The Hebrew word for sacrifice means to come close, korban in Hebrew. The mikveh was an essential component to coming close to God. When the temples were destroyed, the first temple 586 before the Common Era, the second temple destroyed in the year 70. And since that time, we don't do sacrifice anymore. We don't have a temple. Judaism spread out all over the world, but that inclination and that desire to come close to God has never left us. And that desire and the connection of that desire to the mikveh is what makes mikveh so powerful. 20 years ago, we built a mikveh here in our synagogue, a community mikveh for all. And when we built it, I was asked, who's going to come to the mikveh? We don't need a mikveh. We never had a mikveh. There were other mikvehs around. We didn't use them. Why do you need a mikveh? And I gave what I think was an honest answer. I don't know. I'm really not sure. But I have a hunch about all of this. I'm not sure who's going to come. I'm not sure who's going to find meaning in this, but I have a hunch that if we can return and restore the mikvah to its original purpose, that of spiritual purification, that of coming close to God, I think people will respond. And so here we are, 20 years later, and the use of the mikveh is something that occurs here each and every day. We have women who come in the evenings to mark their monthly cycles. We have people who convert to Judaism, who come in here, who enter the water as one thing and come out as the next. We have people who are beginning a new relationship, bride and grooms going into the water and returning themselves on some level so that they can start over a new life with a new person. All of these and so many more uses of the mikvah take place here each and every day. And what we have found through this process is not something that's old and archaic and irrelevant. On the contrary, the usage of the mikveh continues and grows as we go because people are beginning to understand something they never understood before. That is that through this Jewish ritual, we have a way of marking a transition, of beginning anew, of returning to creation in a personal way, returning to that moment of a crossing of a sea so that we can enter as one thing and come out as something else. This type of transition and renewal was lost without the mikveh, and now we have it. And now we use it. And I hope that you'll think about this. And for whatever reason you're watching this, maybe you'll consider as well making mikveh a part of your ongoing life. Thank you for listening. Shalom.
Shalom, and welcome to the mikveh. My name is Lori Cooper. I am the director of the mikveh. I think I might know why you're watching this video. You are perhaps interested in learning more about Judaism or mikveh, or you might even be getting ready to come to the mikveh. So I'd like to just talk with you a little bit about who comes to the mikveh. Why would someone use a mikveh? A mikveh is used during times of transition and transformation. A mikveh is used during times of birth and renewal. When are those times? Conversion is the first thing I think about. We have many people who come here for conversion, and that it's certainly a time of transition. And we have women coming monthly to mark the cycles of their bodies. We have brides and grooms who come, and we have people coming before Shabbat and holidays. So the mikveh is being used a lot. It also is being used in expanded ways. We have people coming now for celebration, buying a new home, getting a new job, or people coming for healing during difficult times. So you can see that this is one busy place. I want to talk a little more about transitions. Transitions are moments that we all go through in our lives. They're fraught with anxiety, they're fraught with concern and anticipation. The way Judaism faces moments of transition is by going to the mikveh, by stepping into the warm waters and going through those warm waters and experiencing a rebirth. So going back to what I said earlier, people who are going through transitions of change, brides and grooms, conversion candidates, women who are monthly coming to mark their bodies and the cycles of their bodies. These moments are marked at the mikveh. The proper use of mikveh requires total immersion. Now, we're not used to total immersion, and certainly not in Judaism. We don't have anything else, any other mitzvot, that require us to put our whole body in. We like to take small steps. We like to just put our foot in, perhaps. Not with mikveh. With mikveh, you need to be totally immersed in the mikveh waters. How do we do that? We need to undress. We need to shower. We need to be physically cleaned, because mikveh is not about physical cleanliness, it's about spiritual cleanliness. I want to get back to this idea of being naked in the mikveh. Why should we be naked? Why are we doing that? We are reenacting birth. When a baby is born without anything covering them or serving as a barrier between them and anyone else. That's the way for a person who is immersing would go in, without barriers, without nail polish or glasses. What I say to people is, anytime you go to the mikveh, you take off anything that can come off, anything that would serve as a barrier between yourself and the mikveh waters. We talk about immersing in the mikveh and standing before God the way that we were born into this world. But I think what's really important is to focus on emergence. Who are we when we step out of the mikveh waters? Why did we come to the mikveh? And now, who are we when we step out of those waters? As one enters and emerges from the mikveh, they are naked, and we provide as much privacy as possible at our mikveh. How do we do that? We make sure that when you are stepping down into the waters, you have complete privacy. The attendant has her back or his back to you with their eyes closed. And when you're standing in the water feeling comfortable, you let us know, and then you start with the immersions. The attendant is there to make sure that your mikveh dunks are kosher and to make sure that you're safe. I should also mention that there is only one person in the mikveh with you, in the mikveh room, and that person is of the same gender as you. I'm very proud of our mikveh. Our mikveh, a community mikveh, was built in 2002, and since then it has witnessed over thousands and thousands of immersions. Come, let's look at the mikveh. So this is our mikveh, the place where I've spent over 20 years being part of special occasions in people's lives. The mikveh is made out of rainwater. It's made out of rainwater, at least 200 gallons of rainwater and tap water. It's cleaned weekly. We have a filter, and it's kept warm. It's kept at about 90 degrees. Over here we have steps walking down, 7 steps, to remind us of the 7 days of creation. And that's really what mikveh is all about. It's about creation. It's about starting over, rebirth. In our mikveh, we have books and readings that you can look at before you immerse. You have the opportunity to sit with a family member or a friend, especially if it's wedding time, to come and give each other blessings. When one they immerse 3 times. There are 3 dunks, and between the immersions there are brachot, there are blessings to say. And of course, if you need help with it, there's a laminated sheet, or you can repeat after the attendant. You have now seen the mikveh and learned about mikveh. If you plan to visit us, we will welcome you and we will guide you through this beautiful mitzvah, this beautiful moment. And shalom.